What characters are going to get buffed or nerfed next? Well, actually on Reddit, someone created something called the Influential tier list aggregated, which combines all of the different scores and stats that many different creators actually ranked each character and put it all on one list, so we can see what characters are known to be underpowered, overpowered, and what is most likely going to happen in the balance for the foreseeable future. So we're going to break it all down, but do me a huge solid and smash that like and subscribe. We are so freaking close to 50,000 subscribers, and I would love to get there. And let's get right in. Now, there are 8 different people that are being taken into account on this list. I didn't make this list, but these are the people that were randomly selected, I guess. Emong, Frito, Kiriko, Khaleesi, Crow, your boy, Bro You Whack, and Game Leap. Now, as we see on the left, we have a tonal tuning score, and we have it all the way up from 16 all the way down to negative 14.5. And basically, the higher your tuning score or towards the top of the tuning list, that is characters that are believed to be some of the most powerful, if not the most powerful characters in the game. And the characters at the bottom are believed to be the weakest characters in the game. So at the top, you could probably justify or argue for some sort of nerf or balance. And at the bottom, you could justify some sort of buff. Now, let's first off look at the characters that on this list are deemed quote-unquote perfectly balanced. These are all the characters with like a tuning score of 0 or really close to 0. So characters like Cassidy, Torb, Diva, and Soldier are all in this tuning score of 0. And that means that these characters are not very strong, but also not particularly weak. They're very middle of the pack. Now, this really lines up with my personal belief on a character like Diva or a character like Soldier. These characters can be really strong, but you're not abusing the most powerful characters in the game. Perfectly capable of carrying you to very high ranks, but they aren't overpowered or overtuned. They aren't going to boost up your score just by playing them. You have to play them well, and you will succeed. And there are several characters also around this on the upper or lower limit. Characters like Baptiste have a score of 1. Characters like Doomfist, surprisingly actually, has a score of -1. And Bastion has a score of -2. These are characters that are just outside the thresholds. Doomfist is definitely an interesting one because the community perception is that Doomfist is pretty weak now. But especially on this list, a lot of people aren't ranking Doomfist quite that low. And it's actually interesting because a lot of people super disagree on where Doomfist should be placed. Emong has Doomfist at C-1, Frito A1, Kiriko C-1, Khaleesi C-1, Crow and myself both at A1, Bro You Whack at B0, and Game Leap at C-1. So everyone has them at completely different places. And of course, the justification and the reasoning of these tier lists are not always the same. For instance, in a lot of my tier lists, I talk about the average player experience, and then sometimes some of these tier lists focus more on the highest ranks of play. So it's definitely going to not always be the most consistent. But I do think that community perception for Doomfist is going to change a lot more as we proceed. Now, let's talk about some characters at the top of the list. Characters that universally are said, hey, these characters are really strong, and there could be an argument to nerf a lot of these characters. And at the very top of the list is Kiriko as the most powerful character in the game. And I think that everyone pretty much universally agrees with how strong Kiriko can be. Doesn't mean that Kiriko is super strong in everyone's game. This is a pretty hard character to learn, get damage-based value with. You have to time your abilities properly. But even at a base level, Kiriko still gets a lot of value. Most people really point to Kiriko when we see what broke the Hog meta. Being able to basically just override anyone's mistakes is a super powerful ability. But I would actually say that Kiriko doesn't need huge nerfs to move her on this list. All that needs to happen is a slight increase in some amount of cooldowns. You can increase her Suzu cooldown so there's more windows to punish her after you intentionally bait it out, or you could increase her teleport cooldown so that she can't easily just teleport over and over again, get out really easily, and a lot of her mistakes are actually punishable. There's several different ways you could do it, but I would do one of those two things or a slight combination of both. But you let me know how you feel about Kiriko's state down below. Now, the next characters that are super high up on the tuning list is Roadhog at 15, Orisa at 13, Sojourn at 13, and Lucio at 13 as well. Now, for Roadhog, we already know that Roadhog is going to get changed, losing the one shot and going to get completely reworked. So that's a character that we 100% know is going to get nerfed. So yeah, but when we kind of rotate over, we look at a character like Orisa, who's very strong right now. For the most part, everyone either ranked Orisa in S or in the top of A tier, but something to consider, and I do actually think that Orisa could use some amount of nerfs. I think the damage buff is a little bit overtuned, but consider that Orisa is super strong against specifically Roadhog. Now, when Roadhog gets removed and not played as much, two things will happen. One, Ana will be played less, which Orisa is a very good counter for, and two, other tanks that actually are particularly good against Orisa, like Winston, who wants to jump past and avoid, or Zarya, that is actually better at brawling on the front line, plus we might get Zarya buffs. Orisa could actually fall down without you actually even needing to touch Orisa. So I think that while you could tune Orisa a little bit, especially when you start to change things in the rock, paper, scissors tank meta, everything could change around one tank change. You remove the top tank like Roadhog, and every single tank position could move. So that's just something to consider. And if Blizzard goes in and like changes a million different tanks, then it might just create chaos where things would have actually bounced themselves out with just a couple of small changes. So interesting. Now, Sojourn, once again, is a character that people still feel is the best DPS character in the game. And while I wouldn't be surprised if they like nerf her in one way and buff her in another so that she's still strong, but she's like more balanced for being pocketed by Mercy in high ranks of play, at this point, I'm just freaking tired of talking about Sojourn. Can we just like delete the character? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sorry, Sojourn Bates. Now, honestly, I think that that is where the conversation to nerf ends. Like, Lucio is definitely equal in tuning score, but there is never a conversation to nerf Lucio, and I don't think anyone wants to nerf Lucio. If you do want to nerf Lucio, let me know down below. But I have not heard any single person ever say Lucio is problematic. So yeah, underneath that, I would say, no, it's perfectly fine. But if we go down towards the bottom, now we can go down to the bottom of the list, and we can see all the characters that have the worst scores, and we could be like, okay, what actually needs a buff? So the bottom, like literally the hell's pit of bottom is Brig, 14.5 is super low. Emong rated it D-2, Frito C-3, Karq D-2, Khaleesi D-2, Crow C-2, myself D-2, Broyuek F -2.5, and GameLeap D-2. So everyone is just putting it like as far down as their lists go, basically. And Brig has just lost her identity. What she was good at in Overwatch 1 was removed going into Overwatch 2, and honestly, with the new design philosophy and the way that the game is played, Brig's old identity as a CC heavy tank hybrid just doesn't fit the design philosophy of Overwatch 2. And in my personal opinion, I would like complete reworks for the character. Honestly, if we didn't have so little supports, I would love to see like something in the lore drop that shows Brig like taking up the mantle, taking up the reins, and then there's a rework of Brig to the tanking category, and then Brig's an actual tank, and they move her, they change her abilities, and she gets like a sick upgrade, new shield, yada yada, and now she's a tank, right? You can't really do that when there's so few supports. If we had like 6 more supports added to the roster, I could see a situation where in the lore, Brig, you know, has to step up into a higher role, and it is like replicated in the balance where, you know, she gets swapped to the tanking role. I think that'd be fucking cool. I don't know, maybe I'm just dreaming, but yeah, we know Brig's freaking ultimate is getting changed, but I do think that just a complete rework to the character's kit, keep some of the bits of it, especially the flail, I think is a good idea, and maybe like a skill shield, but I don't know, add some other things, like change up how she plays. I think you could do a million different things. Make her shield actually reflect damage. Make it so you get some sort of power up if you time damage properly with the shield block. I have no idea how to balance this character. I just know that she definitely needs a lot of changes. Now, another character that is on the bottom is actually Hammond. And Hammond's an interesting one, because Hammond's all the way low down this list, and I think that most people agree that he's pretty underpowered, but also one of his best counters is down right above him in Sombra. We'll talk about that in a second. And secondly, I think that Hammond is kind of on a knife's edge, right? Where if you buff him too much, he could become insane in a 5v5 format. And I think that you could make an argument to buff him somewhat, but I would be careful to not over buff him, because I think a Hammond meta could be very frustrating with the pure lack of CC in the game. Having an unkillable Hammond could just give everyone a terrible time. But definitely let me know your opinion on this matter down below. Now, next up, we do have to talk about Sombra and Junker Queen, two characters that we know Blizzard has already shown interest in buffing. Once again, Sombra's a character that I think could be really easily overbuffed, but you could start somewhere small and then just see what happens. And then with Junker Queen's another character that they're probably going to buff simultaneous to other tank nerfs, and the tank meta is going to shift up like crazy, but I'm pretty curious to see what's going to happen at the end of the day. And then there are other characters that could be in the conversation for various things. We still don't really know how Ramacha's going to be at the end of the day. Characters like Genji and Hanzo both heavily suffer from the changes to the DPS passive. And just personally calling myself out, here's a couple of characters that I disagreed with the majority of the other people on. I disagreed with the majority of other people that Bastion deserved a B tier, and I actually rated Bastion D-2. On top of that, characters like Winston or Echo, I rated slightly higher than the average. Now keep in mind, every single creator is going to have intrinsic balance, basically due to their rank, due to their community, or just due to other people's opinions. It can be really easy to be swayed by other people's opinions. So all of this could be wrong. You tell me what we got right and wrong, and tell me what character you think deserves a buff and a nerf in the future. But thank you so much for coming by. Smash that freaking subscribe. Happy Christmas Eve, and I'll see you next time.